All right, guys. So as we start off with Unit 2 notes, first thing we got to kind of put our head around is and understand is who our first five presidents were. All right, number one is George Washington. Number two is John Adams. Number three is Thomas Jefferson. Number four is James Madison. And then number five is James Monroe. Now, you don't have to know their exact dates, but you do need to be able to identify their order and who went first. So now, one way to easy to remember James Madison and Monroe is they are alphabetically, so M-A before M-O. Now, when we began to look at George Washington, he is going to set a number of precedents when it comes to being president. Some things that people didn't even know how they would be handled. So first, he will serve only 2 terms. This will not be a requirement initially, but he is only going to serve 2 terms. And everybody said, what are we going to call the president? And he said, we'll just call him Mr. President. All right, other important aspects that we need to understand that George Washington is going to do is that he's going to favor something we like to identify as non-intervention in Europe, okay? In other words, he is going to issue a proclamation of neutrality, staying neutral in European problems. And this again allowed the U.S. to stay neutral with France against Great Britain during the Napoleonic Wars. So right after U.S. gains its independence, France and Great Britain go out at war with each other. Well, if we recall, who helped the United States, the American colonists during the American Revolution? France. Well, George Washington turns around and tells France, hey, sorry, we're not going to get involved. So this is an idea that the United States is going to remain neutral, not get involved in European problems. This is going to be something we're going to see be carried on up until really World War II. Now, he's also going to have to prove that the Constitution works. And so during Washington's presidency, he had to respond to a rebellion. Now, he responded to this rebellion by showing his constitutional authority to enforce laws, and he used the military to put the rebellion down. This is something that people wondered because, as we know, the story of our government goes as a strong government under the king, a weak government under the Articles of Federation, and now people are trying to figure out what it's going to be like under the Constitution. So Washington showing, hey, look, I'm going to use the power given to me by the federal government. I'm going to enforce these laws, which was actually a tax. And he put the rebellion down. So this event proved that the Constitution worked, all right? 3 W's, Washington, whiskey, worked. Washington, whiskey, worked. Washington, whiskey, worked. The Whiskey Rebellion proved the Constitution was going to work because George Washington was going to enforce the laws. That was something that was going to happen. So now, he also is going to build a cabinet, a group of advisors. And it's going to be unique because you're going to have unique individuals in place. First will be his Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton will be the Secretary of the Treasury, which is spelled wrong right there. Now, this is unique because he wanted to expand the power of the government to stabilize the nation and its economy. When he looked at the Constitution, he said this is a loose interpretation. That it says this, but it means the U.S. federal government can do this, 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 and this. Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, will be his Secretary of State. Now, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson did not get along politically. He believed that you must limit the power of government to those areas described specifically by the Constitution. Or he believed in a strict interpretation of the Constitution, meaning the Constitution says you can do this, that means you can only do that. Everything else is reserved for the states. Now, the division between these 2 ideas of Alexander and Hamilton and Jefferson are going to fuel the development of political parties. Now, and it's going to come so heated that in Washington's farewell address, the final speech he gives as presidency, he is going to talk about 2 things. He is going to warn about the dangers of political parties, factions, all right? And then he's also going to remind people, the nation, to stay what? If you said neutral, you would be correct, in European affairs. Now, the second president of the United States is going to be John Adams. And what we just go through talking about, political parties, these are going to destroy his presidency, okay? The development of political parties are going to destroy his presidency. John Adams isn't going to respond the best way either. Now, we recall John Adams being someone who went over to France, helped convince France to help us during the American Revolution, and he was also George Washington's vice president. Now, to curb his political opposition, which this is going to kill him, guys. It's going to kill him. He's going to help pass two laws. Okay. The first is known as the Sedition Act. Now we're going to see the Sedition Act again, and there's going to be another one. So we need to understand that sedition deals with speech, and what he did is he helped pass through Congress to make it a crime to write, publish, or speak anything of false, scandalous, and malicious nature about the government. So that's pretty hardcore, and hopefully your mind's thinking. Next, he also increased the residency requirements for U.S. citizenship to 14 years from 5. So now what you have here is a lot of immigrants which are immigrating into the U.S. liked Thomas Jefferson's ideology and what he was pushing. And so he's trying to curb political opposition to prevent immigrants from getting the right to vote here. Now, Thomas Jefferson is going to attack this like crazy. All right. He's going to come out and say, man, states do not have to enforce this law if they don't agree with it. And here we go, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we begin to see an idea known as the doctrine of nullification, saying that they can nullify, state laws can nullify federal laws. Woo! They can't. All right. This debate is surrounding states' rights versus federal authority, okay, is ultimately going to play a role in the events leading up to the Civil War. Okay, one of the issues. Now, John Adams is going to lose the election of 1800 to Thomas Jefferson. He's going to be a one-term guy. All right, now, big idea. Coach Coffey, what makes the United States of America different from every other country in the world? It was this election in 1800. It became known as the Revolution of 1800. Now, why is this? Okay, here we go. It was a peaceful transition of power in 1801 from one political party to another. And it was accomplished without violence, okay? Some countries to this day still have an issue with this. The United States, our founding fathers said, you know what? The people, the government, the way it was set up, we are no longer in power. We were the political party in power, and we will peacefully give up our power, and it'll transition to another group. And because of this, we can see the transition from a Republican candidate to a Democratic candidate to a Republican candidate. We can see this without violence, and we can see this transition occur. Now, we also have checks and balances built in, so we know that we can have authority in other sections. Now, it already popped up, but how was the presidential election affected by the Sedition Acts, guys? Is that people feared that John Adams was attacking their First Amendment rights, which is, of course, the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the freedom of religion, the freedom to petition, okay, and the freedom to protest. Now, the election of 1800, which you've already seen a little bit, this is kind of how it was broken down. You can see the number of electoral votes in which Jefferson received. And, of course, he dominated your southern into your western states. Now, Jefferson then becomes president in the third president in 1801. Remember, elections are always on the even years. Presidents do not become into power until, of course, that odd year. Now, Jefferson's goal, all right, Jefferson's goal, which now is for some reason not here. Jefferson's goal is that he limited the federal government. He wanted a limited federal government. He wanted a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Okay. He wanted to give more powers to state governments. Now we're going to pause here, and then we'll pick back up on this a little bit later. So if you have any questions, please let me know. And always remember, smile. It's